On the busy, crowded sidewalk of Michigan Avenue in downtown Chicago, a wealthy tech billionaire named Andrew Coleman had just stepped out of his Tesla Model S when suddenly a small figure collided hard into his side. Before he could catch his breath, the young boy in worn-out clothes stumbled forward and took off running into the crowd. Andrew adjusted his designer suit and reached for his phone to check the time. But something felt wrong. He looked down at his shoulder. His leather bag was gone. He whipped around, his eyes desperately searching the packed Chicago street. But the boy had disappeared like a ghost in rush hour. His heart hammered in his chest, not because of the MacBook inside or the cash in the front pocket, but because of something far more precious that bag contained, something he had carried every single day for 11 years, something he could never, ever replace. In that moment, Andrew had no idea that this 10-year-old thief would drag him face to face with a truth that would destroy everything he thought he knew about his past and reveal the son he never knew existed. What's up, fam? Welcome back to the channel. Before the story begins, smash that like button and hit subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment down below and let me know where you're watching from. I want to know how far our story travels. 3 weeks earlier, Elizabeth's alarm screamed at 5:30 a.m. in the tiny one-bedroom apartment she shared with her son Robert on Chicago's South Side. She dragged herself out of bed, her bones aching from yesterday's double shift at Joe's Diner, and shuffled to the kitchen that was barely bigger than a closet. The apartment wasn't much: peeling paint on the walls, a radiator that clanked like it was angry at the world, furniture from the Goodwill on 47th Street, but it was clean. Elizabeth made damn sure of that. You could be poor, but you didn't have to be dirty. "Robert, baby, time to get up," she called softly, filling their one good pot with water for oatmeal. 10-year-old Robert emerged from the couch where he slept every night, his blanket folded neatly the way his mama taught him. He rubbed his eyes and grinned at her, that smile that made every sacrifice worth it. Saturday mornings were their ritual. While the rest of the neighborhood slept off Friday night, Elizabeth made pancakes from a box mix and Robert set their small table with mismatched plates. They'd sit across from each other in the weak morning light, and for those 30 minutes, they weren't poor. They were just a family. "Mom, can I ask you something?" Robert said one Saturday, drowning his pancakes in the cheap syrup they bought at the dollar store. Elizabeth's fork paused halfway to her mouth. She knew that tone. "What's on your mind, baby? Why doesn't my dad want to know me?" The question landed like a punch. Elizabeth set down her fork and reached across the table to hold his small hand in hers. "He doesn't know you exist, baby. And that's on me. Some choices, some mistakes. I made them so you could have a better life." Robert's eyes, those intelligent, two old eyes that had seen more struggle than any 10-year-old should, searched her face. He wanted to push, she could tell, but he didn't. That's what poverty taught you early. Some questions hurt too much to answer. After breakfast, Elizabeth headed to Joe's Diner for the early shift while Robert walked to the library on 53rd Street. The boy had street smarts that both broke and swelled her heart. He knew which corners to avoid, which alleys stayed clear, which shop owners would let you warm up inside without buying anything. He collected bottles and cans for recycling money, helped Mrs. Johnson from 3B carry her groceries, and never, ever forgot to lock their apartment door twice. Most nights, Robert did his homework at the diner counter while Elizabeth refilled coffee and smiled through exhaustion. He'd spread out his math worksheets between the ketchup bottles and salt shakers, working on problems about trains leaving stations and workers building fences, completely unaware that his mother was the hardest worker he'd ever meet. "We may not have much, baby," Elizabeth told him one night as they walked home under flickering streetlights, "but we have our integrity. Never lie, never steal, always do right. That's what separates us. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," Robert said, squeezing her hand. He dreamed big: college, engineering, a future where his mama didn't have to work herself to the bone. He'd give her an easier life someday. That's what sons did. If only he'd known how little time he had left to make those dreams come true. Elizabeth had been feeling off for weeks, bone-deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't touch, a persistent ache in her chest she kept blaming on lifting heavy trays. She'd felt the lumps in the shower 2 months ago, hard little knots that didn't belong there, but she'd pushed the fear down deep. Can't afford to be sick. Can't afford doctors. Can't afford to stop working. So she didn't. It was a Tuesday during lunch rush when her body decided it was done negotiating. One moment she was pouring coffee for table 6, the next moment the floor was rushing up to meet her face. The coffee pot shattered. Someone screamed. Everything went black. She woke up in an ambulance, paramedics hovering over her, one of them saying something about her pulse and blood pressure that sounded bad. All she could think was, Robert. Where's Robert? Who's gonna pick up Robert from school? At Cook County Hospital, they called Robert's emergency contact, Mrs. Johnson from 3B, who pulled him out of 5th period math. He arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and terrified, his backpack still on, finding his mother in a hospital bed looking smaller and more fragile than he'd ever seen her.
Nana.
His voice cracked. I'm okay, baby, she lied, reaching for his hand. But she wasn't okay. The tests came back fast, too fast, like the universe couldn't wait to deliver the worst news possible. Stage 4 breast cancer. Aggressive. Advanced. Tumors in both breasts and lymph nodes. The doctor, a tired woman with kind eyes who'd probably delivered this speech 100 times, sat them down and spoke in that careful voice people use when they're about to destroy your world. We need to start treatment immediately. Aggressive chemotherapy, likely surgery. The upfront cost for the first round is $5,000. Total treatment, including surgery and follow-up, will run about $25,000. Elizabeth's face went blank, then crumbled. We don't have $5,000. We don't have $500. The doctor's expression softened with something that looked like pity, and Robert hated it. Without treatment, we're looking at 2 to 3 months. Maybe less. The room tilted. Robert heard the words, but they didn't make sense. 2 to 3 months. His mother. The only person in the whole world who loved him.
Dying.
In less than 100 days. Baby, Mama's gonna fight, Elizabeth whispered, pulling him close, her hospital gown ruff against his cheek. We'll figure this out. But Robert could hear the fear underneath her words. There was nothing to figure out. They were broke. She was dying. The math was simple and cruel. That night, lying on the plastic chair beside her hospital bed while she slept, Robert made a silent vow that would change everything. I'm going to save you, Mom. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. Robert stopped going to school. What was the point of algebra when his mother was dying? He spent his days at busy intersections on State Street and Roosevelt Road, darting between stopped cars with a squeegee and a spray bottle, washing windshields for whatever change people would throw at him. Some days he'd make $8. Good days, maybe 12. Most days, drivers just waved him off or looked straight through him like he was invisible. He collected cans and bottles from trash bins and park benches, stuffing them into garbage bags until his shoulders ached, hauling them to the recycling center for nickels and dimes. He sold his PlayStation and all his games to a kid from his building for $125 cash. That PlayStation was the only nice thing he'd ever owned, a Christmas gift from 2 years ago that his mother had saved for months to buy. Letting it go felt like cutting off a piece of himself, but it didn't matter. Nothing mattered except her. Mrs. Johnson from 3B knocked on their door one evening and pressed a wrinkled $50 bill into his hand. It's all I got from this month's check, baby. I wish it was more. She had tears in her eyes. Pastor Williams organized a fundraiser at Greater Faith Baptist Church. The congregation, people who barely had enough for themselves, pooled together $600. Robert stood in that church and felt both grateful and broken, because $600 was everything to them and nothing compared to what he needed. Their total savings, counted and recounted on the kitchen table, $920. Elizabeth was deteriorating fast. She couldn't work anymore. The pain in her chest and back kept her in bed most days, curled on her side, trying not to cry out when the waves hit. She was losing weight, her beautiful brown skin turning ashy and gray, her hair thinning in patches. The basic pain medication cost $200 a week, money they didn't have, so she suffered in silence. Robert watched his mother die in slow motion and did the math over and over, hoping it would come out different. At his current rate, $10 a day, if he was lucky, it would take him a year and a half to save $5,000. She didn't have a year and a half. She didn't have 6 months. 2 weeks after the diagnosis, Elizabeth collapsed in the bathroom. Robert found her on the floor, barely conscious, and called 911 with shaking hands. At Cook County Hospital, the same doctor with the kind eyes pulled him aside. "Her body is shutting down," she said quietly. "The cancer is spreading faster than we expected. She needs treatment now. Not next week. Not next month. Now." Robert stood in that sterile hallway and felt something inside him break and harden at the same time. He tried doing it the right way. The right way wasn't enough. Whatever it takes. Robert left Cook County Hospital in a daze, his mother's labored breathing still echoing in his ears. He walked without direction, letting his feet carry him north through the city until the buildings got taller and cleaner, until the people on the sidewalk stopped looking like him. He ended up on Michigan Avenue, the Magnificent Mile, where Chicago's wealthy came to spend money that could save his mother's life 10 times over. Designer stores lined the street with window displays that cost more than his rent. Women in fur coats carried shopping bags from Gucci and Louis Vuitton. Men in $1,000 suits stepped out of luxury cars, barely glancing at the kid in worn-out jeans sitting on a bench with his head in his hands. Robert had $12 in his pocket. $12. His mother needed $5,000. The war raged inside him. "Mom taught me never to steal. Never lie. Always do right. That's what separates us." Her voice was so clear it hurt. But she was dying. Right this second, cancer cells were eating through her body while he sat on this bench doing nothing. What good was integrity if she was dead? He watched the patterns. Business people on phones, distracted, bags slung carelessly over shoulders, wallets in back pockets, purses hanging open. They moved through the world like nothing bad could touch them, like poverty and desperation, and dying mothers were problems that happened to other people in other neighborhoods. Then he saw him. Oh my God," Robert whispered. Andrew Coleman wasn't just some random rich man. He was connected to Elizabeth, connected to Robert's existence. And the timeline, the math, the photograph, it all pointed to one impossible truth. This man was his father. But why didn't he know Robert existed? What happened between them? Did Andrew abandon her? Did she run? Did he even know she'd been pregnant? Robert stared at the photo of his mother's younger, happier face and made a decision. He'd take enough cash to pay what he could to the hospital. Then he'd return the bag and demand the truth. He deserved answers. And Andrew Coleman was going to give them to him. Whatever it takes. Robert went straight to Cook County Hospital's billing department, the stolen cash folded in his pocket, the weight of it both a relief and an accusation. He approached the desk where a tired woman in scrubs sat behind a computer screen. "I need to make a payment," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "For my mom's treatment. Elizabeth Johnson. Room 412. He pulled out the $1,200 bills and laid them on the counter. The clerk's eyes widened. She looked at the money, then at Robert, a 10-year-old kid in worn-out clothes with more cash than most adults carried. "Where did you get this?" Robert had prepared for this question. "Church fundraiser, and my neighbor helped. Please, just apply it to her bill." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, baby." She processed the payment, her fingers clicking across the keyboard. "This covers the first emergency treatment and gets her started on pain management. But you still owe $3,800 for continuing care." $3,800. Robert's brief surge of hope deflated. He'd robbed a man, and it still wasn't enough. He went to his mother's room. Elizabeth was asleep, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, and 4 dripping clear fluid into her arm. She looked so small in that hospital bed, so fragile. Like she might disappear if he looked away. Robert pulled a chair close and took her hand. "Mom," he whispered, "I got money for your treatment. You're going to get better." His throat tightened. "And Mom, I think I found my dad." Elizabeth didn't wake. but her fingers twitched in his hand like she'd heard him somewhere deep in her dreams. Robert kissed her forehead. I'm going to fix everything. I promise. He spent that night in the waiting room, unable to sleep, planning what he'd say to Andrew Coleman. How do you tell a man you're his son? How do you confess you stole from him? How do you ask him why he abandoned your mother? Morning came slow and gray. Robert washed his face in the bathroom, put on his least worn hoodie, and found Andrew's business card in the wallet. Coleman Tech Solutions, Willis Tower, 45th floor. He took the Red Line train downtown, Andrew's bag and wallet heavy in his backpack. The closer he got to the loop, the more his courage threatened to abandon him. His hands sweated. His heart hammered. What if Andrew called the police? What if he didn't believe him? What if he didn't care? But Robert forced himself forward, step by step, because his mother was dying and this man, this stranger who carried her photograph like a treasure, was the only chance they had left. Be brave, he whispered to himself as Willis Tower came into view. Mom needs you to be brave. Whatever it takes. The Willis Tower lobby was all marble and glass and echoing voices. Business people in expensive suits rushing past like Robert was invisible. He walked up to the security desk, his backpack weighing 1,000 pounds. I need to see Andrew Coleman, please, he said. It's urgent. The guard looked down at him with barely concealed skepticism. You have an appointment, son? No, sir, but I have his bag.
He was robbed yesterday.
I'm returning it. The guard's demeanor shifted immediately. He picked up the phone, spoke quietly, then nodded. 45th floor. Elevators on your right. Robert's stomach dropped as the elevator climbed. Through the glass walls, he watched Chicago shrink below him, his neighborhood somewhere in that sprawl, his mother dying in a hospital bed while he rode up to confront the father who'd never known he existed. The Coleman Tech Solutions office was all modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows. The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, led him down a hallway. Mr. Coleman, the young man with your bag is here.
Andrew looked up from his desk.
Recognition flashed across his face, followed by anger.
You're
the kid who took my bag. Robert stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Yes, sir. I'm the one who robbed you. Andrew stood, his jaw tight. I could call the police right now.
Do you understand that?
Yes, sir. Robert's voice shook but held steady. And you should, because what I did was wrong. But first, please let me explain. The words spilled out. His mother's cancer, the $5,000 they didn't have, watching her die slowly, the desperation that made him become a thief. Andrew listened, his anger softening into something that looked like pain. I used $1,200 to pay for my mom's treatment, Robert said, pulling out the wallet. I'll pay you back somehow, I swear. But sir, there's something else. He pulled out the photograph. Andrew went white. He sank into his chair like his legs had given out. Where did you get that? It was in your wallet. Robert's hands trembled. This woman, she's my mother. Elizabeth Johnson. Andrew took the photo, with shaking hands. Elizabeth, he whispered. Oh my God, Elizabeth. Robert's voice cracked. The note on the back says, the day you told me. Told you what, sir? That she was pregnant? That she was pregnant with me? Andrew stared at Robert, really looked at him, and Robert watched something shatter behind the man's eyes. How old are you? Andrew's voice was barely audible. 10, sir. I'll be 11 in April. Andrew's face crumpled. Oh God. Oh God, no. Elizabeth was pregnant? She never told me. She disappeared. Are you my father? The question ripped out of Robert like a sob. Andrew stood, came around the desk, and knelt in front of him. Yes, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. God help me, yes, I think I am.
So?
I think you're my son. Robert collapsed into Andrew's arms and they held each other, stranger father and son, connected by blood, brought together by a desperate crime. 11 years of absence crashed between them in waves of grief and shock and impossible relief. I'm so sorry. Andrew sobbed into Robert's hair. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Whatever it takes. They raced to Cook County Hospital in Andrew's Tesla, the city blurring past. Andrew's hands gripped the steering wheel, and his voice shook as he explained. 11 years ago, he and Elizabeth had dated, fallen in love. But his family, old money, conservative, pressured him to marry someone appropriate.
Melissa van der Berg. White.
From their social circle. Someone who fit. I was weak, Andrew said, his voice thick with shame. I chose family expectations over Elizabeth. I broke her heart. Elizabeth had disappeared after that. He'd searched, but she was gone. His marriage to Melissa ended in divorce 5 years ago. No children. No real love. Just emptiness. I've carried that photo every day, Andrew whispered. Elizabeth was the one that got away. My biggest regret. At the hospital, they took the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. Andrew's heart pounded so hard he thought he might pass out. They entered Elizabeth's room. She was awake, sitting up weakly against pillows. Baby, where have you been? She said when she saw Robert. I was worried. Then she saw Andrew. Her face transformed, shock, disbelief, then pure fury. Get out, she said, voice weak but venomous. Get the hell away from my son. Elizabeth, please. Andrew stepped forward. I said get out. Robert, get away from him. That man is poison. Mom, I know, Robert said quietly. I know who he is. He's my father, isn't he? Elizabeth's anger cracked into anguish. Oh, baby. Oh, Robert. How did you? I stole his bag, Mom, to get money for your treatment. And I found a picture of you inside. Elizabeth covered her face, sobbing. No, baby. You shouldn't have had to do that. You shouldn't have had to meet him this way. Andrew approached the bed. Elizabeth, I didn't know. I swear on everything, I didn't know you were pregnant. Of course you didn't know. Elizabeth's voice was raw. Because I didn't tell you. When I found out I was pregnant, I also found out you were engaged. I saw it in the Tribune.
Andrew Coleman to marry Melissa van der Berg.
Society Wedding of the Year. Andrew winced. I was going to call it off. I was going to choose you. Liar. Elizabeth shouted, then gasped in pain. You chose your family's money over me. You chose whiteness and status over love. I wasn't good enough for your world. That's not. Andrew's tears streamed freely now. Elizabeth, I was a coward. I let my family control me. I made the worst mistake of my life. But I tried to find you. You disappeared. I disappeared because I refused to be your guilty secret, Elizabeth said bitterly. I refused to trap you with a baby. I had too much pride for that. She looked at Robert, her voice softening. So I raised our son alone. I worked myself to the bone to give him a good life. And I did. I gave him love, values, a home. We didn't need you. I know, Andrew said, voice breaking. And I can never make up for that. But Elizabeth, Robert told me about your cancer. Let me help. Let me pay for your treatment. I don't want your guilt money.
This isn't about me.
It's about Robert. Do you want him to watch you die? Do you want him to be an orphan at 10 because you're too proud to accept help? Elizabeth fell silent. She looked at Robert's desperate, tear-stained face. Mom, please, Robert whispered. Let him help. I don't care about the past. I just want you to live. Elizabeth's shoulders sagged.
Fine.
But I'm paying back every penny. And Robert is MY's son. You don't get to swoop in and play daddy after 11 years.
I understand, Andrew said.
But I want to be in his life.
If you'll let me.
If he'll let me. Robert looked at his father. I want to know you. I want to have a dad. Elizabeth nodded painfully. Okay, we'll figure it out. But first, we save my life. Andrew immediately called the hospital's chief of oncology, arranged for the best doctors, transferred $10,000 before the sun went down. Treatment began that evening. Whatever it takes. The next 6 months were brutal. Elizabeth underwent aggressive chemotherapy that left her violently ill, her beautiful hair falling out in clumps, her body ravaged by the medicine that was also saving her life. But she fought.
God, she fought.
Andrew paid for everything, Private room, the best oncologists in Chicago, experimental treatments most insurance wouldn't cover. He showed up, not just with money, but with presence. He sat with Elizabeth during her worst days, held a basin when she got sick, never flinched when she lashed out in pain and frustration. Robert visited every day after school. Andrew had enrolled him at Latin School of Chicago, one of the best private schools in the city. The transition was rough. Robert was behind academically, felt out of place among kids who'd never worried about money, but he had his mother's determination. He got tutoring. He caught up. And he discovered something unexpected. He loved coding. Weekends, Robert stayed at Andrew's penthouse in Streeterville. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. A bedroom bigger than his old apartment. Andrew taught him Python and JavaScript, took him to Northwestern football games, Navy Pier, the Museum of Science and Industry. They were learning each other, building something from nothing. Elizabeth slowly improved. Her hair grew back in soft curls. Strength returned to her limbs. The tumor shrank, then disappeared. And after 6 months of hell, the final scan came back. No active cancer. Remission. Robert and Andrew were there to bring her home from the hospital. She walked out on her own 2 feet, thinner but alive, scarred but victorious. Andrew invested $50,000 in Elizabeth's dream, a soul food catering business called Elizabeth's Kitchen. He structured it as a business loan to protect her pride, though they both knew he'd never collect. Within months, she had corporate clients, wedding bookings, a small storefront in Bronzeville. She was thriving. 1 year after that desperate day on Michigan Avenue, they gathered at Navy Pier for Robert's 11th birthday. Both parents attended together, not as lovers, but as true co-parents who could actually laugh together now. Robert's friends from Latin school mixed with kids from the old neighborhood. He was on the basketball team, pulling straight A's, already talking about MIT. Andrew mentored him in tech, teaching him to build apps and websites. Elizabeth was healthy, successful, dating Marcus, Robert's English teacher from school. Andrew had created the Second Chances Scholarship for children of single parents. Hundreds of kids had been helped so far. The 3 of them sat on a bench sharing funnel cake, watching the Ferris wheel spin against the twilight sky. "Robert," Andrew said, "you stealing my bag was the wake-up call I needed. It brought me back to what matters, family." Elizabeth smiled, a real smile, not the bitter, guarded ones from before. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful you left that bag where Robert could grab it." Robert sat between his parents, exactly where he belonged. "I'm grateful I found the courage to return it, and to tell the truth." The sun set over Lake Michigan, painting Chicago's skyline in gold and pink. Robert looked at his parents, no longer enemies, but partners in raising him. 1 year ago, he'd been a scared, desperate kid facing the worst moment of his life. Now he had a future, a father, and his mother was alive. Sometimes, he realized, the bravest thing you can do is tell the truth, even when you're terrified of the consequences. Sometimes our darkest moments lead us to our brightest futures. I hope this story moved you the way it moved me to create it. If it did, hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me what lesson you're taking away. Where are you watching from? New York? Chicago? Miami? ATL? London? Lagos? Let me know in the comments. And remember, courage changes everything. Truth heals what seems broken forever. Family is what we build with love and effort, showing up every single day. Thanks for watching. Fam, catch you in the next one.